Shadow sparring can be of immense value to Wing Chun practitioners of all levels of experience. Though it has an image of being something elaborate and complicated, it can be incredibly simple, and as such can be a useful training tool. While it must be accepted that there are varying views on how to shadow spar and the purposes of it, this short video aims to give newcomers to the exercise some ideas about how they might go about starting to train it. What actually constitutes shadow sparring is a somewhat subjective argument, since everyone has their own way of doing it, and each person perceives different benefits to be gained from it. For some it is a form of artistic expression, combining shapes and ideas which may not necessarily work together in the context of fighting, but work well together aesthetically or artistically. Other people use it as a form of rehearsal, either in perfecting individual techniques, or practicing combinations of techniques with the intention of programming their muscle memory to be able to perform those combinations instinctively in combat. Beyond merely rehearsing techniques, the exercise can be made more sophisticated by visualizing an opponent and reacting to their movements, as well as imagining their reactions to yours, something commonly seen in boxing training, for instance. Shadow sparring can even be a combination of all of these factors and more. Since this video is mainly aimed at newer students who would like some reference points for getting started, it will mainly concern itself with the rehearsal aspects of shadow sparring. Please note that the ideas and suggestions in this video are some of my preferred personal training methods and do not pretend to be a definitive approach. Almost all students will already have unwittingly done some shadow sparring in the form of practicing techniques on their own without a partner in the mirror. This in itself is a valid form of training, as you're rehearsing the idea repeatedly with a view to improving the technique, timing, positioning, etc. For a beginner, there's no need to make shadow sparring any more complicated than this at this stage of training. Indeed, at the early stages, repetitive practice of the most fundamental movements, punching, turning and stepping, is essential. Once a student has good foundations in place, a good approach to shadow sparring is simply to develop this idea further, so that once you've rehearsed each technique individually to a point where you're satisfied with your execution of it, you can then start to link them together in a logical procession. What this means is you're taking into account the effect each of your moves has on your imaginary opponent, in order to determine which follow-ups can then realistically be executed. For instance, in this simple example I'm doing a side punch, imagining that it's connected with the side of my opponent's face, turning his head away from me, setting me up for a cross. Here it is on a partner to illustrate the effect you would be imagining your action to have on your opponent. Since in Wing Chun we're a multiple strike system and we don't assume that a couple of punches will finish the job, you might choose to follow up the cross by dashing in and chain punching. The idea can then be developed further by imagining what would happen if the side punch did not connect and the opponent blocked or evaded it. So for example, if you imagine that he blocked with his left hand, it gives you the opportunity to park and side punch again. By continuing to apply this methodology to all the other possible reactions the opponent can have, you're able to give yourself a wide array of techniques and situations to train. So for instance, if he blocks with a park sow, that gives you the potential to bong larp. If he evades the punch by moving back, you might choose to double up by following him in with another. If you imagine him trying to intercept the punch by striking beneath it, you might practice covering it and then striking off. So already, from throwing a simple side punch, you now have at least 5 possible eventualities. Each of these eventualities can be extended or combined by visualizing the reaction of the opponent to what you're doing and then following up accordingly. So in these examples, some of the eventualities have been combined together to create a longer series of movements, which are here applied on an opponent for clarity. Please bear in mind that the side punch scenario is just an example, and that this methodology can be applied to pretty much any move or situation in the system. Shadow sparring in this way allows a student to familiarise themselves with techniques, ideas or situations at their own pace. Since newer students tend to train too fast anyway with a partner due to general inexperience, over-enthusiasm or anxiety, they are either not given the time to consider their actions by their partner, or they do not give themselves enough time. Training these ideas on your own can help circumvent this problem. Practicing shadow sparring will benefit a student's Wing Chun in several other important ways. Firstly, repeated practice of movements gradually programs your muscle memory to do them instinctively without any thought process. In fighting or self-defense, this is absolutely vital, since you have very little time to think, if any, and if you have to think in a situation, you're probably not ready to deal with it yet. Rehearsing strikes, footwork and movement often, over a period of time, will gradually remove the thought process, allowing the student to move fluidly and intuitively. Since you can't always have a person to train with, shadow sparring is of great value since you can prepare for people's reactions to your attacks with the power of visualization rather than with a real person. As the student becomes more experienced, their power to visualize where the parts of their opponent's body and limbs would be improves, enabling them to train more techniques and with greater accuracy. Of course, when a student has trained for a situation without a partner, there may be a need to adapt it somewhat to work when they do get to try it on one. But familiarizing yourself with a situation beforehand should take out a lot of the stopping and starting that plagues inexperienced students and allow you to execute ideas more smoothly.